The mushrooms said, and I'm sure you'll be horrified, the mushrooms said to me in the Amazon when they were revealing all this information and deputizing us to do all these things, that we said, why us? Why should we be, you know, the ambassador of an alien species into human culture? And they said, because you have never believed anybody, because you have never given over your belief to anyone. Based on my own experience, which is what I think this thing really comes down to, because what we have in the UFO issue is an official position supported by scientists for the pathetic narrowing of the spectrum of allowable phenomena, that the repression, and it is a repression throughout this century, of legitimately available ways of exploring the modalities of consciousness, there will not be a serious discussion of UFOs, or for that matter, of the nature of consciousness itself, until we leave the utterly culture-bound, provincial, and hick-like attitude that science has foisted on us about perturbing the mind. Without the use of psychedelic substances, I think solving the UFO dilemma is going to be as thankless a task as attempting to understand the nature of the universe without availing yourself of the use of a telescope.
I noticed in your book there was a very brief mention right before the section on the La Chorera experience. You mentioned in passing the idea of being in contact with Mantid-like beings in a UFO. And I wonder if there's any more to that.
In this encounter with the mushrooms over, 10 days or so that led up to this experiment, I mean, we had the idea, we even called it the teacher, and I think that we thought the teacher was channeling through the mushrooms. It wasn't the mushrooms, it was the teacher. And the teacher, sort of had this Mantid-like character and so on. So that was it. Relevant to the idea of the DMT entities, because the question that we started out with, is this real?
No one can argue that our theory of the hyperspatial nature of hallucinogenic drug states and the experiment we devised to test that theory yielded not only spectacular results, but a wave particle theory of the nature of time. Was this simply a creative outburst, or was it part of a close encounter with the UFO enigma? After the first mushroom experience at La Chorera, we were involved with two ideas in particular. These were the motif of the teacher and the insect motif. Dennis and I could feel the overwhelming presence of some unseen intelligent entity which seemed to be observing and sometimes exerting influence in the situation to keep us moving gently toward a breakthrough. Because of the bizarre nature of the DMT flash, with its seeming stress upon themes alien, insectile, and interstellar, we were led to speculate that the nature of the teacher was somehow that of a diplomat anthropologist come to give us the keys to galactarian citizenship. We discussed this entity in terms of a giant insect, and through the insect trill of the Amazon jungle at midday, we seemed to be able to discern a deeper harmonic buzz that was the signal keying us to the entity in hyperspace. And from there, fading off gradually, this image of the insect teacher gave rise to numerous entomological speculations.
We were getting this gnosis, and if we did what it said, we could create this object, and that would change everything. It would essentially bring history to an end. And that didn't happen. We experienced about a 2-week extended alter state in which I basically disengaged from reality completely And I was cruising literally through the cosmos. I experienced this state of mind where I thought I had blown up my consciousness to be with the edges of the universe. You know, I was talking about being all one. I was all one with the galaxies, with the universe. And then slowly over this 2 weeks, I began to collapse back, and each 24 hours was another step in this process. So that, you know, first it was the universe, and then it was the supercluster, then the local cluster, then the galaxy, and so on. And eventually I condensed back into my body and my mind, you know, and I mean, severely shaken, obviously.
The sky was clear, but it was still very early and stars were still shining dimly in the west. I noticed that the line of fog seemed to have grown darker and now seemed to be churning or rolling in place. I watched very carefully as the rolling line of darkening mist split into two parts, and each of these smaller clouds also divided apart. It took only a minute or so for these changes to be executed, and I was now looking at four lens-shaped clouds of the same size, lying in a row and slightly above the horizon, only a half-mile or so away. A wave of excitement swept through me, followed by a wave of definite fear. I was glued to the spot, unable to move, as if in a dream. As I watched, the clouds recoalesced in the same way they had divided apart, taking another few minutes. The symmetry of this dividing and rejoining, and the fact that the smaller clouds were all the same size, lent the performance an eerie air, as if nature herself were suddenly the tool of some unseen organizing agency. As the clouds recoalesced, they seemed to grow even darker and more opaque. As they all became one, the clouds seemed to swirl inward like a tornado or a waterspout. The siren sound was gaining pitch, and in fact, everything seemed to be speeding up. The moving cloud was definitely growing larger rapidly, moving straight toward the place where I was. I felt my legs turn to water and sat down, shaking terribly. For the first time, I truly believed in all that had happened to us, and I knew that the flying concrescence was now about to take me. Its details seemed to solidify as it approached. Then it passed directly overhead at an altitude of about 200 feet, banked steeply upward, and was lost from sight over the edge of the slope behind me. In the last moment before it was lost, I completely threw open my senses to it and saw it very clearly. It was a saucer-shaped machine, rotating slowly with unobtrusive, soft blue and orange lights. As it passed over me, I could see symmetrical indentations on the underside. At first I was terrified, but the moment I knew that whatever was in the sky was not going to take me, I felt disappointment. I was amazed, and I was trying to remember what I had seen as clearly as possible. Was it real in the naive sense in which that question is asked of UFOs? No one else saw this thing as far as I know. I alone was its observer. I believe that had there been other observers, they would have seen essentially what I have reported. But as for real, who can say? I saw this thing go from being a bit of cloud to being a rivet-studded aircraft of some kind. Was it more true to itself as cloud or aircraft? Was it a hallucination? If you really wanted to study a aboriginal race, and you really had a hot technology, what you would do is you would study their social psychology, and you would say, are there any chinks in the armor of their expectations about how reality behaves? And you would discover in studying us. This species intoxicates itself, and it has a curious attitude towards its intoxications. Anything goes. Isn't it obvious that an alien would hide its presence in an intoxication? That this is the non-invasive, tasteful, respectful way to have intercourse with another species. You say, you put yourself into a plant, you put a barcode into a molecule, then the shaman intoxicates himself and he says, aha, it's an ancestor spirit, or it's the soul of the plant. But whatever it is, it's giving me good information. Most encounters with extraterrestrials take place in altered states. That's what altered states are. Reality is, the tip of an iceberg of irrationality that we've managed to drag ourselves up onto for a few panting moments before we slip back into the sea of the unreal. What this means, then, you can meet the alien. You can meet the alien tomorrow night, if your connections are good enough. And you can meet the alien over and over and over again. You said this was what you wanted. It is for your transformation. And you can play the game of waiting with the uninitiated, or you can simply go look at the end of the movie. Shamans have been doing this for at least 100,000 years. All of human history is the signifier of the presence of the alien. Human history is what happens to an advanced animal species when it is interpenetrated on a scale of 1,000,000 years by a mind in another dimension. We were selected out of the swift running river of animal organization, took an orthogonal turn, and headed out into the world of symbolic activity, cognition, signification, ritual, analysis, projection. The flying saucers, the alien, the other, is what is sculpting us out of animal organization as we move toward it in time. This is what shamanism is all about. This is what the psychedelic people are discovering as they descend into these trances. I would sit here where the lake emptied and the Agaraparana resumed its languid course. Here at the boat landing, 70 feet down a steep mud bank from the river house, I would sit through the night and watch. And so all night long I sat reviewing the things that had passed, seeming to divide my consciousness and send it both backward through my family tree and forward into the future. I seemed to see all the years ahead, our careers pursued across space and time, and finally vindication as the world realized the truth of the transdimensional nature of the Stropharia visions and the true nearness of the worlds that they had thrown open. For it had become my belief that the contact with an intelligent and utterly alien species was beginning for humanity. It seemed that out of the long night of cosmic time, the novelty of novelties, the moment of contact between minds on utterly different planes was beginning. We were among the first to achieve contact with this other species.